If I tell a girl, you're a complete what would you say to this?
I gave her a nice compliment.
Okay, not exactly. I was actually insulting her. But congratulations, because you just finished texting in kindergarten. But why is this useful? Because if you don't know what something is, you cannot use it properly. So in this video, I'm going to run you through some of the texting categories there are and what the purpose they have. Let's get into it. So the main three categories that we have is DHV, framing, and hooping. DHV is the most important one and also the one that comes first. DHV stands for demonstrating higher value. So the purpose with DHV is that you demonstrate the values that you have in a correct way. Of course, you can also do things and say things that destroy your value. So it's not only like a win situation. Now, the first label that I want to teach you guys is a DHV text. Now, the purpose of a DHV text is a value text. So you want to have a text or a message or even a sentence that you say to a girl in real life that has some value attached to it. So for example, let's take a look at one of the values that you might have is the leadership value. So in order to use the leadership value correctly, you could, for example, tell a story about that you just hired a new assistant. So when you tell something like that, the other person will automatically start to think like, oh, this person has an assistant, therefore he must be important enough to get an assistant, right? So you're able to show your leadership value through the message that you're sending. So let's talk about a message that uses the same principle as DHV text, but does it the wrong way. For example, say, my boss was just yelling at me. So when you say that to a girl, the girl will probably not say like,
oh my God, you're so amazing. Please, can I hook up with you? Please, can you be my boyfriend?
Because you're just portraying that you're becoming less attractive, right? Like that's the whole thing. When you communicate with people, your goal should be to label yourself as an attractive person, because why else are they want to hang out with you? Why else would they want to do that kind of stuff? Now let's take a look at another category that we have under DHV text, and that's disqualify the other person. So the way that disqualify the other person works is you're trying to tame down what the other person says. So for example, let's take a very high value thing. When a girl says, oh, I'm a model, that might mean a lot of different things. So in general, it's a very high level thing, but are we going to try to twist that in saying something like, oh, so if I buy Vogue, you're going to be on the cover, or how does that work? So if you say something like that, the girl will reply with like, oh no, actually like I do Instagram modeling, this and that. So that's not what a real model is, and that's why we disqualify her, right? She says like, oh, I'm a model, we go up, and then we say like, oh, so you're in Vogue, or like, oh, do you like run catwalks? It's like, no, like I'm actually like on Instagram and I have 5,000 followers, 20,000 followers. And like, okay, you just brought her value down closer to your value if your value is lower, right? One important thing about disqualifying another person is you cannot do it when your value is already high. It's important that you don't like try to get her down and down and down, because there's no inherent benefit from it. The only value that disqualifying the other person has is that you try to get the values more aligned to each other. Now let's take a look at the last one that we have under DHVs, and that's storytelling. But storytelling is trying to generate emotions from the other person. There's a lot of different ways how to say things. When you say things in a boring way, the other person is less likely to be very intrigued. On screen you'll find an example of like how storytelling can be done within texting. Now let's talk about the second category of labels that we have, and in this one we're going to discuss reframing and price framing. Now reframe is taking the same concept that might be a lower value and making it higher value. So one interesting reframe that it came across like this month is like we had a client who moved to a European city to live there for a month. That's the whole thing. Oh, you're a tourist, you're only gonna be here temporary, therefore you're lower value. So that's the problem that we have, right? That's the sentence that you will face a lot when you go to a different location. So the way that we did this for this client is by saying, oh, I'm staying here for 1 month unless you convince me to stay longer. It's a lot more fun and interesting, not necessarily us trying to prove ourselves, but now it's more that the girl has pressure on her, have a nice time with the guy in order to convince him to stay longer, right? So that's a good example of like how reframing works and how you can use it. Now, what the same line also does, which is the second thing that I wanted to discuss in framing, is price framing. Price framing is the whole concept of that one person has higher value than the other person. And one thing that you can do within that framework is that you can position yourself as the price. Just like chess, you can make a right move to position yourself in the right spot. The most important aspect about price framing is that you get the other person to start chasing you. And that's exactly what happens with the line as well. Like, I'm only here for 1 month unless you convince me to stay longer. That makes a girl want to chase the guy. Now, one important aspect within frames is that you can get frame battle. So if we take a look about the last line where we said, you need to convince me, if the girl is not super interested in you, and if the girl is like, meh, the girl might reply with something like,
I'm not really here to convince people.
And then we're kind of fucked again. So we need to frame it again. So there you can see a perfect example of how a frame battle works. If you frame things a certain way, she can counter it with a different frame. This is also borderline towards flirting. At least if she adds like a funny emoticon like this, but if she says it that serious, she you just reach the spot where you're having a frame battle with her, which is not ideal, of course. That's why price framing is also not under the umbrella of DHV, but it's actually under framing, even though it actually has the purpose of increasing your value. Now, the last category I want to talk to you guys about is hooping. So if you have a conversation and everything is fun and cool and you're building value and she's interested in all that kind of stuff, overdoing the value part doesn't do a lot. Like once the value has been built and once the girl is interested in you, you can move on to the next phase. What should be the next phase of like the interaction? Building a connection with the girl. And that's where hooping comes in. Like hooping is all the things related to building a connection and making the date actually happen. Now let's talk about two of the subcategories under hooping that you can use. So one is logistics. Logistics is purely getting from A to point B, right? Point A is texting, point A having a conversation in a bar, point A doesn't really matter, meeting on Instagram or whatever, and point B is having a date, having a relationship, all that kind of stuff. So the logistics to make that happen is you actually need to meet the person. You can also see like we have the three categories of DHV, framing and hooping, so you can see that comes at the end. It's not something you instantly do in the first line, when the value is not there, when the framework is not there, when the connection might not be there, right? Now let's take a look at another subcategory of hooping called normal loops. Normal loops are actually the things that most people think texting should be.
Hey, what are your hobbies? Where do you live?
That's the boring shit that most people say, right? As you can see, within our texting model, it comes all the way at the end. You don't start with it. Of course, it's important to know a little bit about the person, but it's not necessarily that it's something that you need to start with right off the bat. Right off the bat, you should make sure that your value is high enough that she's actually interested in meeting you, right? You want to build value in initial stages of an interaction. Later on, you can get to know the girl a little bit better and build that connection with it. That was it. I hope you guys learned a lot. We talked about DHV, framing, and hooping. I don't explain everything. Listen, guys, if I would explain all the subcategories with detailed explanations how to use them, the video would be like at least 5 hours long because it's just such a complex topic, and each subcategory kind of needs to have its own video that lasts 20 to 30 minutes. Actually, we have that's in our course. So hope you guys learned from it. If you want to learn more, subscribe because I'll just release a lot of these videos talking about this concept. If you like the video, I'll talk to you in the next one.